Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the ADX Momentum Insight indicator by SeleneAlgo. First we'll be kind of breaking down some of its sub-features, and then towards the end we'll just kind of tie it all together and show how everything works really well together. First we'll start off by what ADX actually is. ADX is your average directional index. Basically it shows you your trend strength and your momentum. Traditionally though, it is not direction specific, and that's important to remember. Let me pull up the stock ADX indicator just to show you. So generally, as a rule of thumb, let me set a line here. Generally, as a rule of thumb, anything that either hovers below or hovers right around the 20 to 25% range is generally considered a sideways market. Case in point, we have this whole little area up here. It's just not really doing anything, but it isn't until we really break out of this and come through it that you can see this nice bullish momentum, this nice bullish movement we got. So, and generally it's 20, 25. There's, some people say 20, some people say 25. It's just all a matter of, I guess, interpretation. So let me just go to, it is on traditional. So generally, whenever you load it up for the first time, you're going to see it's going to be on zero lagging 1. There are different zero lagging methods built into this that kind of captures those trend swings, those switches a little bit sooner than what you would normally see on traditional. And it tends to really make it stand out, whereas some of your smaller trends, they tend to just kind of bottom out. And, it basically adds a nice contrast between your larger trends as well as your smaller ones. Let me switch it to traditional real quick. Alright. So generally, like I said, it's not direction specific, which is, I think, is where a lot of traders they don't really mess with ADX too much, just because, when you're looking at it by itself, it tells you that a strong momentum is forming, a strong trend is forming. However, you don't, obviously know which direction it is. So that was something that we definitely aim to kind of address and fix with our ADX Momentum Insight indicator. So not only is it highlighted for the actual trend itself, whether the momentum is bullish or bearish, but in the background we actually have something that we're calling the interpreted direction. So what this is that generally when you have, so this whole green area here, this is all bullish momentum. And obviously when bullish momentum is increasing, that translates to upward movement on your chart. However, even though this is technically still bullish momentum, as it starts decreasing, when you have a decreasing bullish momentum, it actually translates to either flattening out and going a little sideways, or it actually, if it's a peak, which you see like here for example, it actually starts sharply going back down and reverses the trend that was currently following. And let me just pop this over to zero lagging. So the zero lagging, you can really tell it kind of sharpens out your edges a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So anyway, but yeah, so this is just the basics of what ADX is, how we're treating it a little bit differently. Like I said, this is a zero lagging method. It's a little bit sooner to respond. You see the trend reacting a little bit faster than you typically see with ADX. So let's move on to the next feature. All right, for the next feature, we're going to dive in. Pull it up really quick. All right, so a couple things to go over. First, I'll just show you really quick this range bound area that you show. So like I said previously, on traditional, on traditional ADX, you typically want to hover right around 20, 25. You can see I added a few informational pieces just to give you a few tips on how you want to, either how you interpret certain things or just, kind of advice on how to set certain features. So generally ADX traditional is between 20 or 25, and you can set this area, 20, 25, etc. And what it does, it moves this, line up. But you can also have the option to hide the areas that are actually below it. So it really does kind of just highlight the areas that really are taking off with a stronger trend. You can kind of and if you want to be a little bit more conservative with it, you can adjust it one way or another. It's all up to personal preference. Personally, I like showing everything just because I keep an eye on it whenever it's heading down toward the trend, but that's just me. So next feature, let me grab this really quick. Grab this. So let me pull up a traditional MACD indicator. So we're going to hide the histogram to start. So, all right. So on a traditional MACD indicator, your blue line here is your fast-moving MACD line, and your orange line is your signal line. It's a slower-moving signal that your MACD intersects with. And generally, it's real simple to read it, is that when your MACD crosses up and is above it, you generally have a bullish momentum, whereas when your MACD crosses below your signal line, obviously you have a bearish momentum. So what we did is we actually mapped our MACD line to our ADX. And by doing so, we actually took the relation between these two lines and actually mapped a custom signal line on top of it. So if you look carefully, we're getting the same relation between the two lines, but it's given in perspective of the ADX instead. So there's a couple things you can do with it. Generally, if you don't want to actually have the extra lines on here, we actually do a color coordination as well. So instead of just seeing the lines cross over, you actually have the green or red for bullish or bearish. And actually, let me just show this really quick, circling back to this. And just to show really quick, if it's a little fuzzy about exactly how it's working, let me just do this real quick, just to kind of show a little perspective. Let's do signal. Bear with me for just a moment. I'm just going to color coordinate it the same as the ADX Momentum indicator. Aqua, and then let's see. Alright, cool. Alright, nice. So let's do this. We will hide the histogram for a second. And we'll just make this MACD line something a little different. Alright, let me push this up. Alright, so this should be a lot easier just to interpret what's happening. Color coordinated it the same way as it is on the ADX Momentum Insight. Obviously, you see whenever it crosses bullish or bearish, you're getting that aqua or maroon. So it makes it a little bit easier to interpret. So, alright, let me switch over really quick. So the next drop down on that option was the color coordinate the ADX with the MACD crossover. So what it does is it hides that actual MACD custom signal line and actually just color coordinates it instead. So what you get is this really interesting overlay. It's just an extra piece of information, an extra confirmation on top of an already helpful way of interpreting ADX. So case in point, let me look for an example. Actually, okay, I'll use this as an example. So here we have obvious increasing bullish momentum. The actual histogram behind here is green, signifying it's bullish. Normally, without this MACD line, we would wait until we hit this red background, which is the interpreted direction of the chart. That's when we start having the decreasing bullish momentum. But by having that extra MACD, that's just extra confirmation a little bit earlier than what we normally would have had that something was about to happen. And you can see examples of this, obviously, all over. It also helps for when trends are getting low, if you're a little on the fence, watching MACD closely can kind of give you that extra, that extra piece of information to make your decision whether or not you should get in or out of the trade. Side note also, it's important to remember, like I mentioned, whenever ADX dips below this line, now right now we are on ADX traditional. By default, when you turn it on, it is going to be on zero lagging 1. I do recommend keeping on that. It is a bit more responsive and accurate. So whenever you dip below this line, if you are in a position currently and you are waiting to exit it, as a tip from what I've found is that when it dips below this line, generally you don't want to be making any rash decisions or any big moves. What you'd want to do generally, and let me look for an example of somewhere it didn't work out. There's not too many areas. So generally whenever it dips into this area, you can kind of expect it to go sideways. It may go gradually a little bit up or a little bit down, but you're not going to see just this giant skyrocket up or down while it's underneath this line. Typically what you want to do is you want to wait for it to break out of it, and then depending on whether it's bullish or bearish, in addition to what MACD might be looking at, that'll help your decision depending on which position you're in, whether you want to enter or exit the trade. So with MACD, the only one piece of information we're missing here is obviously the histogram. So let me pull that back up. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the histogram just shows, the larger the histogram is, the larger the distance is between the two lines. And general rule of thumb, obviously the bigger the gap is between it, the faster that trend is actually, the stronger it is and the faster it's accelerating. And obviously as you get more and more narrow, and let me increase this a little bit, as you get more and more narrow, the lines are coming closer together, signifying that you could have a cross, or at least the trend is kind of evening out. So obviously by just having this color coordination, you kind of lose that extra dimension, that extra piece of information. So what we did is we added something a little bit different. It's a simple idea, but it's extremely effective from a visual perspective. If you look on the last option down, it's the same thing, color coordinated ADX with MACD crossover, weighted line. So what this does is it actually weights the line thickness based on essentially a reflection of what the histogram is. It's based on how close the lines are together. So case in point right here, this was very small for the histogram, and we actually got a thin line showing it. Now if you had known that, obviously without that, this looks just as strong as any other line. Now obviously from an ADX perspective, it is dropping below our 15% right there, which I guess that's probably not the best example. Let me look for, okay, so this is a little bit above it. You got a thin line here, same thing here, we got a little gap there. That's when it was making that crossover. Sometimes you'll see areas that it's just really thin for an extended period of time, and that's really where this weighted line comes into play, kind of like this. I mean, yet again, this is underneath ADX, so you can't really expect it to go up or down. Case in point, pretty much from this point to, well, I mean, really even a little bit past that, but it started building up some momentum after that as well. But yeah, having that thin line, it just having that extra, yet again, just an extra piece of information. Visually, that's really easy to spot. There's not much interpretation that's involved, and you don't have to sit there and really think about it. Just really simple, effective way of interpreting information. So, all right, I'm going to move on to the next feature. So this next feature down, and it kind of complements everything we've been talking about thus far. It's the Momentum MACD correlation flag. So what this does, and I'll just enable that really quick. It actually shows you flags kind of when, the stars are aligning and you have multiple confirmations of what you're looking for. And let me just get out of this for a second. So, yeah, so you can see here, not only did we have from this point, this little peak up here, that we had decreasing bearish momentum, which was an interpreted, bullish direction. And case in point, you can see it happening right there. But this MACD right here is just that extra confirmation. If you were watching this, so typical rule of thumb as well, whenever you get these sharp peaks and a quick little crossover, a quick direction change, that's usually a very good indication that it's going to make a sharp and quick move in the opposite direction. So obviously if you have decreasing bearish momentum, you're going to have increasing directional movement, and vice versa. So but yet again, just having that MACD crossover just gives you that extra little confirmation, and that flag is thrown just as yet again another quick visual aid, especially when you're scalping. This comes in handy, just kind of seeing those flags pop up. It just kind of gives you, it's less interpretational on your part. And what you can do too, excuse me, you can actually adjust the momentum strength, kind of the minimum momentum strength. So by default it's on 2, which typically shows a lot of flags, or at least a decent amount. I mean, you can go to 1 if you really want to like see every little confirmed swing that correlates with MACD. But typically what I do, I'll usually bump it up maybe a couple, maybe up to 5 sometimes. And on some charts you won't see much of a difference. Others you'll actually see quite a few disappear. It just depends on me. So you can see a few flash here and there. A few of them are moving. Like case in point, if I went to like 10, it starts taking out a lot more. And basically what it does is it'll start suppressing some of those maybe weaker trends that you're getting some ADX movement, but it might be kind of slow or gradual. It might not be a sharp movement up or down. So, play around with it, see what works best for you. Keep in mind that every chart in security you look at is different, especially in different time frames. So, play around with settings, find one that really works best for whatever you're trying to do. So the last thing we're going to be looking at is the price range option at the bottom here. So let me see. Here, I'll hide the flags just for now. All right, so the price range, and I added a little description here, and y'all are welcome to hover over and look at it. So let me just show this really quick. All right, so what this is, it's a weighted moving average of the most recent bullish and bearish price ranges. So kind of as a good way of interpreting it is generally when the line is alternating above the zero without crossing down, you can generally expect a bullish trend, and vice versa when it's alternating below the zero line. That's usually indicative of a bearish trend, obviously. So these little areas that are highlighted here, any areas that move against the interpreted direction, which yet again, interpreted direction is the ADX interpreted direction of what the chart is doing, which is the background color. Any areas that move against the interpreted direction are highlighted as areas of caution. So, whenever you have a bullish area of interpreted direction, yet you have your weighted range is kind of going down a little bit, it's highlighting it, just showing you that it could be pulling down on that a little bit. So also general rule of thumb is whenever you see the weighted range direction change, you can typically expect 1 or 2 candles of maybe a little bit sideways movement, or maybe a little bit of indecision. So just kind of a good rule of thumb. Yet again, if you click into this, I go in a little bit more depth here. I got kind of a little paragraph explaining it. And just like everything else, this is also, I put it on a sensitivity in terms of the highlighting aspect of it. So, if you feel like, some of these highlighting's a little bit false positive, you can really increase that sensitivity, that minimum threshold of what it takes to highlight it. And it only highlight kind of the couple areas that might be a little bit more extreme. And a really great thing about this too is that depending on how high the peaks are or how low the peaks are, that really can show you sometimes an early indication of sometimes even before the zero lagging ADX can even show you. I mean, usually only by 1 or 2 candles. It's not like you're not going to get hours notifications for anything like that, but 1 or 2 candles above, you can usually kind of keep an eye on it. And like, right here, for example, this little peak of ADX, once you saw that, you could see some red candles going down. So obviously you see it going down. However, this weighted range, this price range, kind of give you a little bit of an early, kind of a hint that something might be getting ready to happen. So it's a useful tool. Obviously all these things are, play around with it, see which things works best for you, see what you like best. And just kind of go from there. So that kind of wraps up this video. I hope it was helpful and informative. Using the ADX Momentum Insight in conjunction with Selene is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful combination. Basically, whenever you're seeing signals, whenever you're looking at the dashboard of Selene and you're seeing different information coming your way, yet again, the dashboard just gives you a ton of information that's super helpful, and it kind of interprets it in a way that's not just dumping things at you. It tells you what things mean and how things can be interpreted. But using the ADX Momentum Insight with it, it just confirms everything so much easier. It really does make it a lot more clear. It takes a lot of the stress out of your trades, and it really does clear up a lot of that FOMO sensation that a lot of traders have. Just because whenever you start looking at this, you get a lot more comfortable. You start recognizing exactly what the market's doing, and if a market goes down a little bit, looking at all these different indicators and tools, when it's about to go up. So play around with this, guys. Definitely let us know if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, criticisms, anything. I'm always open to hear new ideas. So hope y'all enjoy. Have a great day.